Hi, welcome back. So we've been talking about a couple problems Star Rail needs to get fixed for a while. Today let's talk about something else. The MOC is certainly getting harder, and with it being considered the prime and standard endgame mode where your account is tested most, people are going to be looking to be able to clear it as easily as possible. Pure Fiction and Apocalyptic Shadow are definitely much easier, but we're still going to be taking them into consideration today. As we know, most players that play this game don't spend any money, because some of them somehow see themselves as superior to others when they don't, but disregarding that fact, it's still definitely the most fun way to play the game. So today, let's take a look at the current best F2P teams to clear Honkai Star Rail's endgame content as easily as possible. Before we start, you should like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this in the future, and join the Express Rain Discord server for a community filled with discussions just like this one. The daily upload streak is continuing despite having a hump in the road, so with it on, let's try and reach 3,000 subs before the end of the year. That would be pretty cool and I would appreciate it. Now let's get onto it. First things first, the rules. Most importantly, all F2P teams are going to be capped at 2 limited 5 stars. There's going to be at most 2 5-star characters per team, or 1 character and 1 light cone. All teams should have been able to clear at least one side of most previous MOC rotations, and should be able to, with reliable predictability, clear future MOC cycles as well. When it comes to Pure Fiction and Apocalyptic Shadow, since they're much easier, they're definitely going to be side characters of this video, but as I said, I'm still taking them into consideration. If, for example, a certain team is insane in the MOC but sucks in the other two, while a second team is good in all 3, the latter is going to get ranked higher 9 times out of 10. Finally, I'm also going to consider the evolvability and potential resilience of these teams. If you can easily create an F2P team at the start of your journey, but later on becomes completely useless because it's unevolvable or the units get completely power crept, then it's going to rank lower. Oh, and I'm also going to mention more F2P options more than the main team we chose, just to be a little more fair to some players. Now let's get started already. First team I want to talk about is definitely Acheron. While some people really try and make it seem like Acheron fell off, she really didn't. Just because Feixiao could arguably be better doesn't mean Acheron fell off, but I digress. She's still one of the best DPS units in the game, so she's first on the list, which is, by the way, in no particular order right now. We're going to rank all the teams later on, so when talking about Acheron F2P and considering the rules of either using a limited character or a light cone, then it's a really tough question. You could either go for E0S1 Acheron along with Gunaifen and Pella, or you could go for E0S0 Acheron along with Jiaoqiu and Pella instead. In my opinion, going for Jiaoqiu is going to be the slightly smarter way of going about it, especially since he can be used in a couple other teams. However, getting Acheron without getting her light cone is kinda stupid, as we all know, and when we take a look at how many people actually do have Acheron's light cone, it's more than 91% of Acheron players that own it, so I think I'm going to actually give Acheron a pass here and keep her at E0S1, but also give her Jiaoqiu. I make the rules and I can break them if I want to. I'm going to deduct a couple of points away from her though for needing her light cone so badly. The final team we're going to be basing everything off of is E0S1 Acheron, Jiaoqiu, Pella, and a sustain unit, who we'll just say is Gallagher because he's the best F2P option. So with that aside, let's take a look at this team's capabilities. First off, Acheron is definitely good at every single one of the endgame modes we currently have. She's great in Pure Fiction, and having Jiaoqiu just makes her even better there. She's great in Apocalyptic Shadow, but is a little bit slower relatively if the boss is single target instead of multi-target. And of course, she's great in the MOC. She was definitely able to clear every single MOC after she came out, and in 3.0 and possibly 3.1 and further, she's still going to be able to clear the MOC pretty effectively. She also has a neat little thing in her kit that ignores 20% all-type resistance and reduces all weaknesses with her ultimate, so she really does not give a shit about weaknesses. Definitely a little weaker when there's no lightning weakness, but there's also no net disadvantage when using her against enemies with no lightning weaknesses, so she's definitely very versatile. Good everywhere, very good against 2 or more targets, and still passable when using her against only 1 target. When talking about how fast her clears are, then they're also pretty damn fast. F2P Acheron teams can reliably clear almost every MOC stage in 3 cycles or less, and again, they perform very well in APS and PF. Her evolvability and longevity is questionable though, as Jiaoqiu seems to be the pinnacle of what an Acheron support should be, aside from just having larger debuff multipliers. The next debuffer that could be used with Acheron is probably coming out in around 3.3 to 3.5, and even if they are a great debuffer, they're probably not going to be the prime Acheron support, so she's probably not going to have the brightest future, especially if power creep keeps going the way it is, which is honestly what seems like is going to happen. So overall, Acheron is definitely pretty damn good, but she does have a couple downsides like desperately needing her light cone and not being super evolvable. If you can get past these two issues though, then Acheron is definitely a non-negotiable insane DPS to have, especially for F2Ps after you get her LC. For those that don't have Jiaoqiu, then just use E0S1 Acheron alongside Pela and Gwenithan, and that team is going to serve you pretty well. You'll reliably be able to clear every single MOC with lightning weakness in 5 cycles or less, and yes, even the 10 million HP boss in 3.0 because that thing kills itself. The 10 million HP is a lie. Next up is Feixiao, who is notorious for being great when it comes to F2P teams. First off, unlike Acheron, Feixiao doesn't rely on her light cone nearly as much. As usual, it makes her a lot more powerful, but it's not a must-have for free-to-plays by any measure. Instead, it's definitely a lot more worth it to use the second limited 5-star here on Robin. I'm not going to use it on Topaz because we all know Robin is the best unit in the game, and if you have a chance to get her, you definitely should. The main team is either going to be Feixiao, March, Robin, and a sustain unit, who would be Gallagher for the best case scenario, or Moza instead of March, whichever one you have better relics for. If you also have E2 Moza, then he's about the same level as E6 March. E6 Moza is definitely better, and E6 Moza actually performs just as well as E0 S0 Topaz. But since Moza is a new character that's only been on one banner so far, barely any people are going to have it at full E6, so I'm actually going to use March for the main team instead. If you start this team out with March, Moza, and Gallagher alongside Feixiao, then it's insanely evolvable. Not only can you change out every single unit in the team for a new one as you go along, but Feixiao will get better the more FUA hunt units come out that act similarly to Topaz, or just any FUA units in general. There are many opportunities to buffer up, unlike Acheron, who needs a very specific archetype, which is of course a debuffer that applies debuffs outside of their turn, just like Jiaoqiu. Feixiao just needs characters that are sub-DPS support follow-up units. This team performs incredibly well, and when using March instead of Moza, you also have the extra add-on of March being able to reduce wind weaknesses when Feixiao is her master, so you mostly don't have to worry about weaknesses aside wind. This team definitely performs pretty well, and since Robin is the second 5-star unit we chose, it is going to perform better than if it had Topaz instead. And I know that from experience because my friend has Feixiao and Topaz but no Robin, and only Bailu is a sustain for that team, and playing it is kinda every time there's a wind weakness in the MOC or even just a single target boss, Feixiao is going to do pretty well. When there's wind weakness, you're definitely going to reliably clear everything in 3 cycles or less, and when there is none, but it is a single target boss mostly, you're definitely going to clear in 4 cycles or less. She's not going to be that great in the 3.0 MOC however because there is no wind weakness. There is a single target boss in the first half, but it is the bug that spawns in a lot of freaky f***ers on the side, and you really want to kill them. Since Feixiao is way more single target, she is going to have a slightly harder time than other AoE units. I don't expect her to be able to clear in 5 cycles or less, unless you're using a premium team. She's also going to be entirely useless against the second half 10 million HP boss. I'd love to be proven wrong though. When talking about Pure Fiction Apocalyptic Shadow, then for Pure Fiction, Feixiao is a lot worse than other units. She is going to be better once the new system for Pure Fiction comes out, but it also really incentivizes you to defeat the enemies on the side rather than just target the main boss, so Feixiao is still going to have a tougher time than other AoE units. She's not going to be terrible, but definitely not as good as others. With Apocalyptic Shadow, she's just the top DPS unit for that mode. She is the highest damage boss killer in the game, she just definitely needs enemies to have wind weakness, because unlike other modes, you usually really need to use exactly the characters that match the boss's weaknesses in Apocalyptic Shadow. Because they tend to increase elemental resistance to elements they aren't weak to by 40 to 60%. Even if she does ignore weaknesses, she's going to be nowhere near as good when there is no wind weakness. Unlike Boothill, who is the most versatile single-target boss killer, he can just cheese everything because not only does he have the help of Ruan Mei, who has all-type resistance penetration in her ult, but he also adds a faux physical weakness with his ultimate, and his break damage is absolutely insane. Now let's get back to the MOC. Other teams like the one using Topaz instead of Robin, or E0S1 Feixiao with March and Moza, are going to be a little less powerful than Robin, but since Feixiao is Feixiao, it's not going to be detrimental to not have Robin. Expect to clear most of everything where she's a good matchup in 4 cycles or less, or maybe even 3 cycles or less still. So overall, she's pretty good of course. She is way more evolvable than Acheron. You can start out with a completely free-to-play team, and over the course of a couple patches where the reruns are right, get every single unit that she's going to need forever. You can easily zero-cycle MOC stages where they're wind-weak enemies, with her most premium teams that you can get after just a few months of playing. However, she is a lot more reliant on wind weakness than she lets on at first, and especially in the Apocalyptic Shadow, and she isn't really as good as other units for pure fiction. The last team we're going to be looking at today is either Rappa Super Break or Firefly Super Break. I'm lumping them both in together because they're basically the same thing, with a couple exceptions. The teams we're going to be using is, of course, Firefly along with Ron May, Harmony MC and Gallagher, and Rappa along with Fugue, Harmony MC and Gallagher. This team definitely has the highest damage floor out of the rest of these F2P teams. However, let's get straight into evolvability and longevity. Sure, you could pull Fugue and Linkshot to make this team slightly stronger, but the small upgrades you'd get from these two are negligible at best. Sure, Rappa is very strong with Fugue and the upgrade she gives is noticeable. Firefly on the other hand is just worse with Fugue rather than Harmony MC. It also should be noted that HSR's dev team is very obviously moving away from Super Break. It is a very niche meta for sure, unlike Acheron and Feixiao that can really be put up against everything, because it really needs the enemies to be broken for you to deal damage. While that sounds insanely easy to do and something every team in the game does, and while it is very easily counterable. It is something they are already confirmed to do. In the 3.1 Apocalyptic Shadow, as I've said in a couple of videos before, they're going to introduce a version of Hule, which so far seems completely immune to being broken, which means he's also completely immune to Super Break. I am sure you'll be able to break him in some capacity to trigger the Apocalyptic Shadow buffs, but Super Break thrives off of being able to break enemies insanely quickly because of the weakness break efficiency buffs that you get from E1 Fugue and Ruan Mei, as well as Firefly's kits. You're either not going to be able to break the boss at all, which is the unlikely option, or you're going to be limited on how quickly you can break it by whichever mechanism the boss is going to use to break its own weakness. So far, we only got one rumor about the 3.1 boss and no further updates, but if it is true, then they're very obviously moving from Super Break, which means there are going to be way less scenarios where it's the best team. However, when there are no enemies immune to break, it is definitely incredibly versatile. Both these teams can deal with every single endgame mode, whether MOC or APS or PF. They have been able to clear every single mode ever since they came out, but as we said in the future, they may struggle a little bit depending on how the dev team moves forward. I, for one, am not very optimistic about these teams, so finally, let's rank them now. I think I'm definitely going to put Feixiao F2P team as number 1, because they're insanely evolvable and will destroy everything when there's a wind weakness, and depending on the rotation, could still work if there are no wind weaknesses, especially if there's also fire, lightning or imaginary, which are, as we know, the elements of our best supports. You can go from having no limited supports to having a team filled with limited units after just a few months of playing and pulling on the right banners. Feixiao's best teams can easily zero cycle content when it's right for her, and her more F2P teams can easily clear it. There's also a much brighter future for Feixiao when it comes to new supports, because she will get better every single time an FUA focused unit, especially supports and sub DPSs, come out. I'm going to put Acheron in second place. She is definitely way less F2P friendly than Feixiao, and even less F2P friendly than Super Break by a huge margin. However, she's also way more versatile than both, and has a much longer predicted lifespan than Super Break. AoE enemies are going to fill the MOC in Apocalyptic Shadow in the coming updates, and since Aglaia is one main focus of these updates, there's going to be a lot of lightning weak scenarios in every endgame mode. I expect Acheron to become a lot better again soon. I'm going to put Super Break, whether Firefly or Rappa, in third place. They were and are very strong, but I have a strong feeling that it's going to get a lot weaker in the future. I've been saying it over and over again, it has a very high damage floor, but it also has a very low damage ceiling. Not only is Super Break a little less buffable and way more niche than things like Acheron and Feixiao, but its supports are very niche as well and need to be focused on Super Break to really make it better. Unlike Acheron and Feixiao, which respectively can either make use of every single debuffer that comes out or make use of every single FUA unit that comes out. The more either gets power crept or starts becoming immune or resistant to Super Break, the more these teams get less useful. Even though I find Super Break insanely boring, I'm really trying to be as little biased as I can be. I think Super Break is definitely a more fleeting meta. For all these reasons, I'm going to put it in third place. So that's it. Feel free to disagree with any of these rankings. These are just based off of my opinions and my predictions about what's going to happen in the meta, based off of the preliminary info we got so far. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this in the future, and join the Express Discord server for a fun community where you can find many discussions just like this one. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you next time.